Welcome everybody. I'm Christina McGrath. I own Swellfit Living. I do optimization of the mind and body through nutrition, yoga, mindfulness, exercise, all sorts of good stuff, private coaching, and yeah, I love it. Today we're going to be talking about mindfulness, including a couple tips on different techniques for mindfulness and meditation, and then also Charles is going to dive into how it's actually affecting us and our brain. So,
yep. So good evening, everybody. Nice to see you all. Yeah, I'm Charles Leon, as I was last week, and I am this week again. One-time designer, sometimes speaker, sometimes bloggist. So Christina and I set a whole series of webinars, and we've now come to one that sort of pulls quite a lot of things together. And it's surprisingly difficult to talk about, I find. And I'll tell you why I find it difficult to talk about. To be mindful is basically, it's a verb and it's doing, and I can do mindful. That's okay, I can get it. But when you say mindfulness, well, that's a noun. And then I suddenly think, well, what is it? And how do you, I mean, the problem I have with it is it's a state of being. It's sort of a state of awareness. And I'm not sure that anyone, unless you're the Buddha, can actually can genuinely get themselves into that state. There are very, very few people, I think. However, what is really interesting, I think, about mindfulness is that it has now been scientifically sort of supported and proven to have enormous health benefits, but not just small health benefits, big health benefits, particularly in the realms of sort of mental health. But let's not forget that mental health has an effect on physical health as well. So just on a very simple level, I think mindfulness, without any doubt, increases self-confidence. And it increases your awareness of your own surroundings. Medically proven to reduce stress, and reduce stress in a very healthy way, because obviously no chemicals involved. And also pain relief. Now, if I'm not mistaken, and I have to say there's a lot of things today that Christina and I will talk about that we're probably not fully qualified to talk about, particularly on the medical side. But if I'm not mistaken, meditation has been proven as useful in some types of operations where it's much better to keep somebody completely alert. So I think there's medical and physical benefits. And also just benefits for working with your focus, your concentration, your creativity that we'll come to again in a moment. But I did find a really good definition, which I'm going to kick off this evening with, which is this: it's meditation, or mindfulness rather, is a psychological process of purposely bringing one's attention to experiences occurring in the present moment and without judgment. What really attracted me to this is the way it pulls together everything, but the without judgment, which is a very, very important part, not just of meditation, not just of mindfulness, but also brainstorming. Brainstorming, which sounds completely oblique and different. When you brainstorm, one of the key components of brainstorming is not just generating ideas, although that is the major part of it. The other part of it is also about suspending judgment. All ideas are good ideas, and to some extent that sort of is where it correlates, I think, a bit, Christina, but you'll put me right if I'm wrong, in that you don't judge what's coming up, you let it come past you, or you use it, or you work with it. But you don't sit in judgment on it. And that's to do with changing habits. That's to do with having different mindsets, with assumptions, with stereotyping, and all that kind of thing. The other definition I found, which is probably more popular, is a means of developing self-knowledge and wisdom. I'm not sure. Well, first of all, I'm not sure that I fully understand what wisdom is anyway. I don't know what it is. I'd love to find out. But self-knowledge, yes, I can see how that works. So, right. So I'm going to hand over to Christina, who's now going to sort of begin to explain that meditation is one way of creating mindfulness. So, Christina.
Yes, I just wanted to touch on one thing that you said. I think it's interesting that we talk about that non-judgment, because that's also another key component that we talked about with flow state, which we'll go into as well later. And I think this is mindfulness and meditation is bringing everything that we talked about together and really being able to witness what's going on and kind of clear our mind a little bit more. So we'll give you the tools. So meditation is just one way of creating mindfulness, being present. Meditation is an approach to training the mind, almost like fitness is an approach to training the body. That's what I think of it as. I think it's also really interesting, in the Buddhist tradition, the word meditation is equivalent to a word like sports. So we're tackling a very, as Charles said before, a very broad topic, and there's a lot of different ways to go about it, and hopefully you'll come out of this with a little bit of knowledge about how you can integrate it into your life, and how it could be beneficial for your physical and emotional health. So there are many different kinds of meditation practice, and they require different skills. In the Buddhist philosophy, the ultimate benefit of meditation is the liberation of the mind, which is also what Charles mentioned before about the non-judgment, not holding on to something, but allowing it to witness and possibly just let it go as well. So what does that clear mind mean? And also how does that come back to kind of the Buddhist ideas that that you're going to present right now, Charles?
Yeah, I'm gonna just sort of outline some of the nice, easy sort of roads into sort of the little I know of Buddhism. But it's important to say that Buddhism isn't the only means to achieve mindfulness or to achieve meditation, but it is the one that pretty much underpins most of mindfulness and mindfulness practices, I would say. So Buddhism, which I'm a big fan of, a really big fan of, has basic precepts that govern and guide your life. And I'm just going to run through those very quickly. There's the 4 noble truths, which I'm not even going to try to pronounce. But the first one is suffering. The second one is origin or cause. That being sort of, this is all about craving, desire, and suffering as well. The third one is cessation or ending, in that you have to somehow find a method to overcome and to end craving or desire and attachment as well. And the final one in the 4 noble truths is the path, the noble eightfold path, which I'll come to in a second. But before that, there are basic precepts, which I think is pretty much true for all, if we can call Buddhism religion, for all religions, which is to abstain from taking life, to abstain from taking what is not given, to abstain from sensual misconduct, whatever that means. I'm not quite sure what that is. I have to find out a bit more. To abstain from false speech, and we come to that in the Eightfold Path, and to abstain from liquors, wines, and other intoxicants, which are the basis of what they call heedlessness. So I'm going to leap straight over to the Eightfold Way, which I think is very beautiful, if nothing else. First of all, there's understanding. So that's basically turning away from this vicious circle of never-ending cravings and desires. There's right intention, which is right thinking or right thought. And this is where it really sort of resonates with me, is that what it's saying is that your thoughts determine your mental state, and then your mental state then determines your actions, and your actions determine your physical state. So the third one is right speech, and we've spoken about this also when talking about habits, in terms of changing habits, in terms of changing mindset as well, is that if you change your language, you begin to change how you think, which then begins to change your mind, if you like, which then begins to change how you view the world, which then sort of snowballs into a right thinking way. Then right action. So if you have your right view, your right intention, your right speech, then you have right action. You must do the right thing. And this comes also, another parallel is this thing that I often go on about, which is attitude and effort. The two main things that you can control is how you think, your attitude, and the effort is the physicality or the resources that you put into something. Right livelihood is the pursuance of an ethical lifestyle. Right effort, so we're back to effort as well, to put the right kind of resources into achieving whatever you want, that being for, certainly in Buddhism, it's towards self-improvement. And then right mindfulness. And there are 4 basic foundations of mindfulness, which I found when sort of researching this. And basically, these cover everything that can be perceived. Now, it seems to me to be very, very important that it's more to do with how you perceive things and then how you interpret things, perception being an interpretation of stimulus that comes in. So the 4 foundations, very quickly, are contemplation of body, contemplation of feelings, contemplations of states of mind, and then contemplation of phenomena. So that pretty much covers everything that you can perceive within the world. And finally, the eighth part is right concentration, and we'll come to concentration, Christina and I, in a moment, because concentration, focus, relaxation are all sort of incredibly intertwined and very, very important in actually sort of getting control of how you want to think, and probably one of the first steps in that sort of thinking. So that's my sort of quick, there are other sort of quick things like the 5 aggregates and then the 7 factors of awakening, which is actually quite nice. So if I've got 2 seconds, I'll just very quickly, the 7 factors of awakening, because everybody likes numbers, like 3 things you ought to know about, but 7 factors of awakening are mindfulness, investigation, energy as well, joy and rapture, relaxation and tranquility. So again, the 2, well, not 2, they're the same. Concentration and equanimity, to accept reality as it is, basically. So that's my, as I say, that's my very quick sort of round of the mindfulness that is encapsulated, or some of the mindfulness that is encapsulated within Buddhism, and why that forms, I think, the foundation of any mindful practice. There are obviously many, many other sort of methods of getting to a mindful state. Prayer, just simple prayer being obviously one of them. So I'm going to hand back to Christina now, if I can,
yes,
to start some of the more practical benefits.
Yeah, so I think those are amazing to know, and I also do think, like you touched on in all of our past things about developing creativity and expanding your mind and thinking in the right way to achieve the right results, even the one big thing, it really goes back to those right actions and that sustained concentration. So I think it's really good to know about those things. And so it was really good to touch on those. So a couple of things. I do find with mindfulness and meditation, you definitely become more objective and less reactive. So instead of reacting to something emotionally, you can kind of look at both sides of the subject or topic and then make a decision based on that, instead of being overly reactive to different things.
It's interesting though, Christina, because a lot of people will say that it's more primitive or more natural to be reactive than to be objective. And to some extent, there's always this conflict between logic and, let's say, non-logical creativity. Mm-hmm. So I think that I'm not a big fan of objectivity, is what I think what I'm coming to with this. And I think objectivity has its place and has its moment, and so does analytical thinking. But as far as creative thinking goes, the early stage of creative thinking, it has to be reactive, and it has to be, you have to absorb and you have to use. And funnily enough, I think that's one of the things that particularly meditation does do, is it is prepared to see, to observe, and to absorb, but not necessarily to react emotionally, let's say. Sorry,
So,
I didn't mean to.
No, that's super cool to just talk about too, because you're right, with an open mind and that expansive creativity, you are going to be reactive. I guess I was more talking about the emotions and the negative talk, getting rid of that and being able to react well in a way. So I understand that way that you're talking about with creativity, and then we're also talking about not loading things with emotions and having kind of a more clear mind in that respect. So both meditation and mindfulness helping that component.
And if you combine that with purpose, then I think you've got harmony. But I do think you need purpose. And one just sort of just because it occurred to me, one of the things that I would criticize a lot of sort of reasonably contemporary sort of versions of mindfulness and meditation is that it doesn't take into account that that we are active human beings and we need to do things. It isn't just about relaxation, it's about relaxation with purpose and having purpose. And I find it quite frustrating if I go to say, for instance, the Global Wellness Summit or something like that, where they start talking about, relaxation and gentle, and yes, that's very nice for a short period of time. But what you really need, that really sort of spurs you forward, is a balance, or balance is also not quite the right word, is this sort of seesawing between the relaxation and the focus and the purpose and the action. So anyway, sorry, interrupted again.
No, that's great. I think that just relates to everything that we've been talking about too. It's like clearing out the space to make more space to work towards your purpose, really.
Yeah, and I think purpose gives us meaning. I mean, or meaning gives us purpose. So once you've decided that you have a purpose, then you have some meaning in your life. And if you want to meditate and relax to enhance that or to optimize it, I think optimizing is another thing that we've spoken about a lot.
Yes.
Then I do really genuinely believe that meditation, visualization, and all the different forms that we'll come to in a moment are probably the best way to optimize your thinking in the present situation, whatever that may be. Sorry, carry on. So talking about the physical aspects, because obviously in all of our talks, we talk about the mind and body and how they're connected. So meditation and the sense of inner harmony and letting go of attachment on what you cannot control, and this mindfulness is really good for a wide host of physical benefits, including low blood pressure, improved blood circulation, lower heart rate, less perspiration, lower respiratory rate, less anxiety, lower blood cortisol levels, and that's our helping us recover faster. I feel like getting into the parasympathetic state, and this is why we do at the end of a yoga practice, you lay down and you actually allow your cortisol and your parasympathetic system to restore and relax in shavasana. And cortisol is related to inflammation as well, isn't it? So maybe that's why we were discussing earlier, and we'll come to it a bit later, about there are some claims that meditation and mindfulness can reduce inflammation in the body. Well, that struck me as, whoa, maybe that's snake oil. But maybe it isn't. If you can reduce your cortisol levels, then, I mean, this is something you taught me, Christina, is that cortisol is very closely related to inflammation and to stress.
Yes,
so yes,
exactly.
Please carry on.
Good. So more feelings. So cortisol, I think, is a big thing, because we're always trying to control those cortisol levels. It's good and it's bad. So feelings of well-being, less stress, deeper relaxation, clear, focused mind, better relationships with others and yourselves. And Charles, you had added this, and I definitely agree with this one.
This is something I picked up whilst sort of researching and reading, is reduction of something called rumination. And rumination is this is that we all have these persistent thoughts that keep on, a bit like music that goes round and round and round in your head, and you just can't get rid of it. And mostly that, or not mostly, but that happens a lot with negative thoughts. So you have persistent negative thoughts. And meditation is undoubtedly very good for clearing or helping to clear
rumination,
persistent negative thoughts. So yeah.
A couple things that when I was working with a corporate wellness in London, a couple of the statistics that I thought was really interesting that we were mentioning is the 2011 Harvard study with the meditation novices. They found that in the area of the brain that stresses out, actually meditation reduced the gray matter in the amygdala, and that shrank. So there's actually physical, and Charles will also get to those later, physical components that are actually shown in the brain on how meditation can actually help. There's also an increase in gray matter in the hippocampus, the area associated with self-awareness, compassion, learning, and memory.
Yep.
And we mentioned that too before, Charles. That was with the London taxi drivers, right?
Yeah, that's the great study about the hippocampus, is that the hippocampus increased in size, it's just a very small area within your brain, increased in size, was proven to be increased in size with London taxi drivers because of their spatial awareness. The interesting thing was that once they retired from being a taxi driver, their hippocampus shrunk back to normal levels. But whilst they were sort of using all that spatial memory and learning, it did increase in size. So again, yet another example of the brain physically being affected by what you see, what you do, and how you think.
Exactly. The other thing that I think is really interesting is that 12 minutes a day helped US Marines keep their attention and working memory. So this was just a concentrated focused meditation they did 12 minutes a day. And there was that was the magic number. I thought that was really interesting. So if you can integrate about that much time every single day, that could really help attention, memory, and all those things, and include increasing gray matter.
Is it a mandatory program for US Marines to meditate?
This was a study that they did, but I know that US Marines and I think the Navy SEALs also do these meditation programs as well.
Apart from things like that.
So there you go. All right, therapy programs.
Yeah,
there's a lot out there, Charles.
Right, there's quite a lot of now reasonably clinically proven medical, not necessarily medical, therapeutic programs that have been now based around mindfulness. Something called MBSR, which is mind-based stress reduction. And this is now sort of almost common practice and is a very good, in fact, I believe even better than drug substitute or for reducing stress. Another one is something called MBCT. They love their acronyms, which is a mindful-based cognitive therapy. So cognitive therapy and mindfulness, you would expect them to be sort of good, sort of brother and sister, and they are now working together sort of clinically. And mindful-based pain management, MBPM, if anybody wants the acronym. And I seem to remember having seen a study, actually seen it on TV, of people once they've had a little bit of training being able to reduce the level of pain that they have just by meditating on it and reducing it. I don't have the actual sort of facts and figures on that one though. There's something called acceptance commitment therapy, ACT. There's something called dialectical behavioral therapy, which sounds political, but it's not. There's something called Marita therapy. We'll come back to that in a moment. Adaptation therapy, Hakomi therapy, which we will talk about again in a minute. And then mindfulness relaxation, of course. So there you go. So those are some of the more clinically based uses of mindfulness. And it's been adopted because they've seen that it works. Very, very simple. Carry on, Christina.
All right, so there are different kinds of meditation. So I'll go back through different meditations and how we can do those in a personal way. And there's a few that I feel like if you haven't started your meditation practice, these are ideal to start your meditation practice. So the number one, concentration meditation. I feel like the idea of a lot of people are, it's hard because I'm not one for sitting still, even personally. And also thinking that you have to clear your mind. And it's not about clearing your mind. It's more of a single pointed focus. It involves, so concentration meditation is single point of focus. You can follow your breath. You can have a single word of mantra. You can stare at a candle flame, listen to a repetitive sound, counting beads on a mala, focus on an object of attention. Each time you notice your mind wandering, because your mind's going to wander. You just want to keep bringing it back and keep bringing it back. And I think that's the most important thing about concentration.
I have a theory about this, and it's related to climbing. I think that the reason that climbing is so seductive for your mind and your body is because of this incredible focus that you need to have to climb. You have to be absolutely in the moment and focusing on exactly what you're doing and no other place, no other time. You don't have room when you're rock climbing to actually sort of think about, what did we have for dinner last night, or that person really upset me. You have to focus on where you are and what you're doing. And I think that's true of many sort of sports and physical activities, is that they bring you into a sort of focus. And we spoke about running and physical exercise as well, that I think all of these things have the ability to bring you into just that present moment, which then narrows your focus. So you're not thinking about too many things, you're thinking about one thing and one thing only. And that, I think, is why it's very, very relaxing, because you're not stressed by these endless sort of ruminations, these repetitive thoughts that go round and round and round in circles because they don't get resolved. So climbing, I think, is for me anyway, I don't climb anymore, but when I used to climb, is a very, 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 very intense way of learning concentration and focus, because you have to be absolutely in the moment. So there you go.
And that also goes along with what we were talking about with flow state being very meditative as well. But I think you're right, with climbing and even with surfing, you have to be in the moment. Or there are consequences as well. So
and I think also that if with climbing is again still a very good example, because if it was really, really easy and you weren't slightly challenged with your skills, then you wouldn't be able to get into that flow state, because you wouldn't be challenged sufficiently. So you do need to challenge, you do need to relax, and you need to practice. So that brings that together. And I think in any case, a flow state of mind, or so-called flow state of mind, is a very similar state of mind, I assume, to a very high level of meditation as well.
And concentration meditation specifically.
Concentration, sorry.
So the next one that we will just discuss briefly is mindfulness meditation. And that encourages the practitioner, and I mentioned this before, is to observe the wandering thoughts as they drift through the mind. So it's almost like you're witnessing, but you're not attaching. And I think this is really good because like Charles was saying before about the rumination, it's like if a negative thought comes up, not attaching to it, let it go, let it wander. There's a lot of different ways that you can do this. You can think about your thoughts in clouds. You can just allow them to pass through your mind and not attach. You can be aware of any mental note as it arises. You can also see, I think this is really interesting, you can see how your thoughts and feelings tend to move in particular patterns as well. Mm-hmm. And eventually an inner balance develops.
And if you remember, when we were talking about mindset, and also, mindset basically, there's this technique that Carol Dweck developed, which is that if you see your negative mindset, package it, give it a personality, and then sort of put it to one side. So there are techniques in a similar sort of way of taking negative thoughts or thoughts that you don't want and just packaging them up and then sort of putting them to one side, but being aware of them, that they are there, not ignoring them or trying to overcome them, just to be aware that they're there, which is interesting, I think.
Yes, I think it's a great way to also not attach to your negative thoughts. So your negative thoughts aren't you, they're just going through your space. Other meditation techniques?
Well, before
Go
I
ahead.
please don't forget visualization, my favorite.
Oh yeah.
Visualization is a meditation technique, if you
Yes.
like. Not quite the same, and I think we were talking about this earlier, is that meditation brings you right into the present moment. Visualization is actually looking towards a result of future, and it's building a story and building an image, or building your mental viewpoint of a future event. So the difference, I think, in the three techniques is that that visualization is more about future-based, whereas the other two types are based more on the present moment. So yes.
Perfect. The other one I just wanted to mention that I use a lot, especially walking beach, woods, whatever, is a walking meditation. So being completely present, being aware of your surroundings. Sometimes I will listen to a walking meditation, or sometimes I'll do it in stillness, or in I shouldn't say stillness, I should say quietness. So those, I really like that as well. If you taking that in, I feel like that's really powerful as well. And the other things that we were going to talk about, speaking of guided meditations, I feel like that's also another great way to start your meditation practice, is to start listening to, there are a lot of good apps, and Charles and I were talking about Headspace is a great app that has really taken off around the world for sure. There's a couple other apps, Synctuition, Calm, Waking Up. I use a lot of Joe Dispenza's apps, and he does a lot about visualization as well. So it's really interesting. He's a little bit.
I think you can't beat a guided meditation. To be honest, it's actually quite. I mean, I think until you practice a lot with meditation, it's very difficult to get yourself into the right state, and it's very easy to do it when you have on your phone or on your iPad or whatever it might be, to have somebody just gently talking you through it. I think I mentioned that when many centuries ago, when I was mucking around in theatres, is that we used to run an improvisation group, and one of the things that we did at the end of all of every session, well, actually no, at the beginning and at the end, was we used to do a sort of a guided relaxation exercise. Now, basically, it was just us talking to people, but taking people right through their bodies, from their toes all the way through, and trying to relax every single muscle as you went through. But they were incredibly effective. In fact, I reckon that they were pretty close to actual hypnosis, which I'm not sure what the relationship between hypnosis and meditation is. I don't think anybody knows exactly how hypnosis works, but it does work. So I think guided meditation and guided apps are really sort of fantastic at the moment. And there's Headspace is the one that I've used, and I think it's Puddicombe, isn't it? Michael, I can't remember his first name, but it's Puddicombe. He has all different kinds of guided meditations, which are just simply sort of you allow his voice to just completely wash over you, and it does transport you to the place much quicker. So I think, yeah. The other thing that I want to sort of go into a bit is that there's been quite a lot of research into the brain and what happens to the brain in meditation, with various different types of waves that run through the brain. And there's various techniques of imaging and analyzing what happens. What they found is that, before I get into sort of which exact areas of the brain are affected or show differences, but what they've proven now is that that meditation does affect attention regulation, body awareness, emotional regulation more than anything else as well. And the interesting one that I'm not quite sure how they've done the studies, but is a sense of responsibility, authenticity, compassion, self-acceptance, and a healthy sense of identity. Now, I don't know how you measure those things, but I've got to say there's some pretty clever sort of tests out there. So a lot of those changes are, they're affected by changes associated with specific areas of the brain. I'm just going to run through a few quick names, if I can, just to explain that they have seen physical changes in the brain that happen, and not just physical changes, but also they've seen various areas lighting up, if that's the right term, showing more activity or less activity when you meditate. So what's called the anterior cingulate cortex, the insula, the temporoparietal junction, it doesn't matter what they are at the moment, well, it might do, the frontolimbic network. The limbic system is basically a fairly primitive part of the brain, and the front of it is connected to automatic reaction, a lot of it anyway. And what they found as well, and I'll come to some of the more specific sort of bits and pieces that get affected, is that this could influence something called genetic expression. Now, what they found, if I've got this absolutely right, is that there are certain parts of the genome that can and are altered by activity, and that they found that this is where we come to this reduction of inflammation-related diseases. We know that it can reduce pain. Maybe, this is just Christina and I's theory, is that perhaps it's to do with being able to mentally reduce the level of cortisol that then reduces the stress, that then reduces the inflammation. I'm not absolutely sure. Grey matter, you get more grey.
With that one, do you think that goes back to what we were talking about before, is that your brain, what you think is happening and what is happening is the same thing? So wait,
I'm not quite sure I understand.
Did I say that right? So whether, this relates to worry. So if you're worried and you're worried, and you are going to develop the stress, and it's actually not even happening, it's just a worry. So by doing this meditation and by doing this mindfulness, you're eliminating those kind of negative ideas, and you're actually producing things that are actually, well, you're present. There's no worry. Everything's fine. And so you're actually producing these expressions that are...
I'm not sure, but I'll tell you a stupid, interesting fact. And the stupid, interesting fact is, and this is completely proven, I still cannot quite accept it. But apparently we have thought the thought before we've thought the thought, if you see what I mean. There is a gap between us actually thinking something and the moment that we think we thought it. Yeah, there is. And it's a few milliseconds. It's proven. It's by a guy called John Bargh, or at least the report is by a guy called John Bargh, and it says, hang on 1 second, it's on my shelf. No, can't remember. Anyway, oh yeah, it's called Before You Know It by John Bargh.
Before You Know It.
Before You Know It, and it's now completely proven that you have thought the thought long in terms of sort of neural moments, long before you actually think you thought the thought, which sort of has got massive consequences for what is free will. Are we really thinking it? Are we thinking what we're thinking, or are we thinking, have we thought what we thought?
We're in a whole different time right now, Charles.
It's very, I won't go into all of that. Okay, so back to grey matter. Grey matter and the reduction of stress. Grey matter also facilitates faster internal reactions, neuro sparks in your brain. Very, very important to work with your grey matter, or to help your grey matter. Omega-3, the miracle drug, not drug, the miracle substance. Right, there's also been proven now that meditation creates a thickening of the prefrontal cortex. Now that's all this bit here, which I have no hair to cover, but it's there. This does all the executive functioning. That's why perhaps all the chief executives are bald. I don't know. It's not that. That's not true. That's right. But so it does thicken the prefrontal cortex. Now, the prefrontal cortex is the thing that really separates us from a lot of other animals, not all, but a lot. And it is about executive function, about decision making and all those kinds of things. The hippocampus, which we spoke about earlier, it does increase its size very minimally, but it does, and that's to do with learning and memorization. The shrinking of the amygdala. The amygdala is this tiny little almond-shaped, well, there are two of them, inside your brain that are responsible for emotion, for stress, for flight, for fight, for very, very core basic reactions to things. And that is affected by meditation and by mindfulness. And the one that that really sort of creases me up is greater amounts of what's called gyrification. Now, it sounds odd, but your brain is a bit too big for your skull, or most of us, and that's why it's got all those folds, because it can't quite sort of fit it in, so they've squished it up and squished it around. Greater gyrification, which is this folding and squashing and squishing, it encourages much faster processing. So again, the more you meditate, if you can help that, there may be other things that do it as well, the faster that that you will process information. And just a few brief notes about some of the waves in your brains, brain waves, let's call them. So this is what happens in meditation. The amount of alpha waves increase when the brain relaxes, and especially when it's involved in intentional and goal-orientated tasks. Now, you want lots of good alpha waves. And beta waves also, which are then a slightly different sign form, occur when the brain is working on goal-orientated tasks, and they are facilitated by meditation. Delta waves, which is, delta waves are characteristic of sleep, and they're much sort of longer and slower. So they are reduced. So meditation is not sleep. And I think that's, well, I think most people know that actually. So meditation is not sleep, and your delta waves that are the slightly more active during sleep are suppressed during meditation. And theta waves, and there may be more waves, I only know these four, that's all I've read about, so that's all there is, which indicate deep relaxation. That's very deep relaxation. They occur more frequently in people who are very experienced or who have practiced meditation a lot. And that is very important because it's a deep form of relaxation. Now, some people, particularly sort of you'll find in sort of elite musicians and people of that sort of caliber, also have very or more theta waves of deep relaxation. So there's obviously something to do with, or some sort of connection between the theta waves and creativity. But that's my theory, not proven. So there you go. So don't hold me to it because I'll get in trouble. Right.
A couple of things that I just wanted to kind of chime in with again, just about different kinds of meditation and a meditation practice that might be able to resonate with you. So after we talked about all the benefits, I'm sure you want to get into it. There's three kinds of learners. So visual learner, people who are obviously could use the visualization tactics that Charles was talking about and we were talking about in our last session as well. Auditory. I think auditory learners are great when they obviously listen to different things. I think a guided meditation or an app would be a perfect idea for any kind of auditory learner. I am very kinesthetic. I'm very sports, movement, feeling kind of learner. So a body scan, like we mentioned earlier, is a very cool way of like thinking about how relaxing your toes, relaxing your calves, like going up your body and feeling and relaxing how everything is. And so that's three different kinds of meditations.
I do use that sometimes. If it's the middle of the night and I wake up and I think, oh, you know, and then I start thinking about things, and then it gets worse, and then I'm getting more and more awake. So sometimes what I do is I'll say, right, I'm just going to lie on my back with my hands by my side and just very gently go muscle by muscle all up through my body. I never, ever, ever get to my face because I've fallen asleep by that time. So it does work.
And it does work. And so, like what you said, usually when we wake up, this is a perfect technique, because usually when we wake up, the brain starts activating. Yep. And then you're like, oh my gosh, I can't get back to sleep. So coming back to body awareness and allowing your whole body to relax, that's a great one for, obviously you can't even get to your head. So yep. It's obviously working very well. So the body scan, I think, is a really good one for everybody to try out. That wakes up. I think those
I'm not going to let you get away with it, Christina. You have to now demonstrate alternate nostril breathing, because this one breaks me up, because I can't. One of my nostrils is always blocked.
So I love this one because in yoga we talk about this a lot, and obviously this is a whole nother ball game. But one of the with breathing, that's one of the things that you can do for concentrated meditation. And a technique called alternate nostril breathing, where you actually close one nostril, breathe in, hold, and then exhale out the other nostril, and then hold, and then in. So you keep going cyclical. And then I'm going to teach Charles that one, so he's going to demonstrate that next week for you. But so you can feel the breath coming in and out through your nose, and it actually really allows you to come into more clarity and focus, and it's a very grounding breath. So
this is what, to some extent, this is what the Hakomi therapy is all about.
Is it?
It's all about this sort of the study of the mind and body interface, and how how you use your body affects your mind, and how you use your mind affects your body. And they're developing therapies based around that sort of mindfulness of the mind-body interface, which I think is really interesting. So lots of businesses have now adopted mindfulness, and not surprisingly, because first of all, they see it as a benefit for their employees. But it's big companies, and to some extent you would expect it. We have the same sort of thing with the way they design their offices. All those sorts of things. So it's Google, Apple, Procter & Gamble, the US Army, which you've already mentioned, General Mills, the Mayo Clinic. They all encourage and use and facilitate the use of mindfulness. And in fact, my daughter used to work for Innocent Smoothies, and they had sort of meditation sessions and mindfulness, not so much meditation, but mindfulness sessions as a bonus for employees, because it engendered good spirit and everything else. So I think it's interesting that companies have really sort of leapt on this and use it as an employee benefit now. As they will, I think, and I think this is one of the things that we spoke about years ago in London, is about mental health as well, which is now becoming very, very, very prominent in the UK, particularly for businesses, to engage with their staff and to support and help. We now have a subject, Christina, that I want to talk about, because I love it and I hate it.
You totally do. It's interesting.
Yeah, I do. It's the law of attraction. Now, I think there's a lot of hokum out there and a lot of snake oil out there about the law of attraction. But it interests me because, unfortunately, I think some of it is actually right. And it is connected to this whole thing of mindfulness. What I find a little bit, well, first of all, to preface all of that, I completely and utterly buy into Earl Nightingale's sort of classic phrase that you become what you think about. For me, how you think is how you act, and how you act is how you think, and the two sort of are revolving around each other. They may be repetitive, they may not be repetitive, very difficult to break the cycle sometimes. But as for just wishing for something, basically, I mean, actually, I'm going to backtrack a bit because I also believe in fairy tales. So there you go. that when you wish for something, it will come true. The bit that I find quite difficult is that the law of attraction, as it's being sold now all over the internet, is about sending a message out to the universe, and guess what? It'll arrive. I mean, it sounds like Amazon to me, which is nearly the same. You just have to sort of think it, and suddenly there it is. The book's arrived, it's on my doorstep, and I'm happy. But I do think that you do become the thoughts that you think, and that becomes your reality, and that becomes how you see the world. And to be able to use and control and to calm that process down, that's why I think mindfulness is very, very, very important. I think it takes time as well. And this goes back to, we were talking about visualization, about, the minute somebody says to me, for instance, how many red cars have you seen lately? And I thought, I haven't noticed any. Suddenly, I'm in the street and I see loads of red cars, which I hadn't noticed. So I think there is this phenomenon. I bet there's a particular term for it. I wish I knew what it was, but that's where you have a specific type of focus that specifically looks for something. I think the other example I gave was having seen when I was a child the film Swiss Family Robinson. There was the word career that came up that I'd never heard of before, and I didn't know what it meant. And then all of a sudden, that word kept popping up everywhere. And so I do think that you do see what you go out to see. So a lot of these things are sort of got stupid cyclical explanations. So that's why I wanted to talk about the law of attraction, because I think, take it but with a big pinch of salt, because I think it can lead you into a false belief that if you just wish it strong enough, it will arrive. And that's maybe the problem with prayer, which prayer is really interesting, I think. And this is a little bit off topic, I know, but prayer is really, really interesting because the benefit of prayer is a very personal benefit, I think, in the same way that mindfulness is a very personal benefit. It's not necessarily about sort of wishing to get something, but that's how it's been portrayed. So you don't go and say, well, what I really need is a Mercedes-Benz. Oh Lord, when you send me a Mercedes-Benz, as was once in one of the singers once said, it just doesn't happen like that. But what it does do is it changes your mindset and the way you view the world, that then enables you to see more of the things that you have been thinking about. And that changes your actions. And if you change your language as well, then you begin to change and things begin to happen in that direction. So that's how I think it does work. But I don't think you just sort of, like I do, click on your phone and you get an Amazon parcel arrive. I don't think it quite works that way. So I don't know what anyone else thinks, but that's my...
I think that was an excellent description of it, because I do think the law of attraction, if you wish for something, it's not necessarily going to pop up. However, if you have the one thing or deliberate practice, or you're working on something, things are going to appear or become easier, or you're going to notice things more that are going to lead you towards your goals.
Yeah. And I think that, again, coming back to purpose and then meaning and all of that, is that once you have a purpose, you have a focus. Once you have a focus and a purpose, then you have a meaning to your life. And then things begin to fit into the right places. It's when you lose your way. But this gets way off topic. Yeah. And well, we can't do that.
Okay, we're going to wrap up.
We are going to wrap up.
We're wrapping up.
So what's next up next week, Christina?
Oh, next week, this is exciting. We are going to be talking about journaling. And we're also going to start to introduce you to different ways of journaling, the benefits of journaling, the benefits it has to creativity, sparking creativity, because we're obviously with all of these talks, we're talking about creative development, achieving your goals, optimizing your brain and your body. And we'll be probably diving into a little bit of a book that Charles and I
adore.
And that might be the focus of our next 7 or 8 talks. So stay tuned. Stay tuned.
Oh, Anne Kupelis has just told us it's called the Bader-Meinhof phenomena or syndrome.
Oh.
So thanks, Anne, for that. There's one thing we didn't, just 1 second.
Oh, Charles. Okay.
You mentioned to me about binaural beats.
Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, what is I didn't know what it was. And so, of course, on YouTube, you can find binaural beats. And I found some. It's horrible. It's supposed to relax you. It's horrible. And you have to do it with headphones because you need both tones. You get 2 tones, and then you hear a 3rd tone somewhere in the middle. No. My advice is don't do it.
No, okay, so don't say that, Charles, because there are certain tones and music that you can use to help different things. So it's a great thing, but you just have to find it. There's a whole bunch of, it's like sports.
Right.
Like there's a whole bunch of different ideas out there. So
I'm not going to take any more though.
You just didn't find your one.
No, I've been ruined. Somebody ruined me.
You haven't ruined. I'm going to send you a good one. Okay.
I'd rather the 3rd song. Anyway, good night, everybody.
Thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Brilliant.